Okay, good afternoon. This is Wednesday, March the 5th, 1997. I'm Doug Horn with the JFK Review Board. I'm Dr. Davis, and I'd like to let you know who we have in the room here with me. They're just listening in. We have the Executive Director, David Marwell, and my boss, Jeremy Gunn, who is the General Counsel here, Mr. Phil Goldrick, and Dave Montague, the investigator who first contacted you. Now that the tape is rolling, I'd like to confirm with you on tape that you have no objections to us tape recording.
Good afternoon, gentlemen, and no, I don't.
Thank you. We've got a topic outline here, sir, and we will try to be precise in our questions and very patient with your answers.
Okay.
Okay. Could you let us know what your duties and responsibilities are today at the university?
Oh, sure. Yes, I'm a professor of pathology and director of neuropathology at the University of California, San Francisco.
Great. And how long have you been there?
I've been here 17 years.
Oh, fantastic. I was fortunate enough to live in the Bay Area for 2 years, 83 to 85, and I miss it.
I can understand that.
Yes, sir. Could you review your professional education and career for us prior to 1963?
Sure. I'm a graduate of the University of Minnesota, both at the undergraduate and of the medical school. I graduated from the medical school in 1956. Subsequent to that, interned at Bellevue Hospital in New York on the NYU service, the 3rd Division, and then went back to the University of Minnesota for training in pathology and beginning training in neuropathology. I left Minnesota in 1960, having been back there from 57 to 60, and came to the AFIP on a special fellowship which was sponsored by the NIH in the neuropathology branch under Dr. Webb Haymaker.
Okay.
Subsequent to that, I went into the Navy on active duty in June of 1961, and was on active duty there until 1965.
Until 65.
Yes.
So in 1963 at the AFIP, how would you describe your job assignment?
Well, I was actually Assistant Chief of Neuropathology. Dr. Ken Earl had come to the AFIP to replace Dr. Haymaker. I was at that time a Lieutenant Commander in the Navy Medical Corps. I reviewed cases, did everything that a staff person in the neuropathology unit would have done. Okay.
And so in the way of review, you were at AFIP in a naval uniform from 61 to 65?
That's correct.
Okay. Well, we're going to move on now to the events of November 22nd, 23rd, and try to proceed chronologically here, if it's okay with you.
Sure.
Okay. How were you notified of the assassination on November 22nd? And
well, yeah, I remember it like most people do very distinctly. I was in Dr. Ed Smith's office, he was the person in charge of hematopathology at the AFIP at the time. My recollection was it was very close to noon, although that's not as precise as it was a few years ago. And we heard that there had been some shots fired in Dallas, and as it went across to the office of the Chief of Pathology at Walter Reed, which was across the building from Ed Smith's office.
Right.
And he had at that time one of the few television sets in the building. And we heard the early news reports and saw the first clips of the assassination in Dallas.
Okay. Were you involved, Doctor, in any events related to the President's autopsy on November 22nd?
No, we were not actually, though we were prepared to be, having heard about the injuries to the head. We thought that we might be called upon to assist or advise at the autopsy. And my recollection is that Joe Blumberg, who was then a brigadier general, was the director. And he and Ken Earl and I consulted together and made preparations to be available. We expected that the autopsy would be done either at Walter Reed or at Bethesda.
Right.
And we set up a kit, as it were, of things we thought we might need, including photographic, a camera, and flash bulbs and so on, and equipment we thought we might need to assist with the dissection. We were never called upon to do so.
I see. When you were watching television that afternoon, do you recall watching a press conference from Parkland Hospital in Dallas?
Very vaguely, yes.
Okay. Do you recall anything about it, the wounds that were discussed or the people that participated in it?
Oh, I'd be calling on my memory beyond reason, I think.
Okay.
I remember a press conference, but I don't remember names of people and so on.
I see. Okay. Dr. Davis, did you participate in or witness any assassination-related medical procedures after the conclusion of the President's autopsy, after the autopsy on the 22nd, 23rd?
No.
Did you participate in any or witness any supplemental brain examination?
No, I did not.
Okay.
Actually, I remember eagerly awaiting the publication of the Warren report because both Jay Boswell and Jim Humes were good friends of mine, and I was assigned on additional duty out at Bethesda. I went out and taught the residents, did neuropathology with them, and our usual sequence was for me to supervise the cutting of brains out there.
Right.
And I remember being out there after that and seeing the notation in the autopsy log. I don't remember the number of the autopsy, but it was merely labeled CIC.
Would that mean Commander-in-Chief?
That's correct.
And was this, could you describe the logbook, what it looked like in size?
Oh, it was a large standard, I suspect, like 15 by 12 inch bound volume that was of blank paper, and it listed the cases. My recollection is there was one per page, and usually indicating the date, the number of the autopsy, and the name of the patient with perhaps some other identifying data on it.
I see.
But I remember that one was just whatever the number was, and then CIC, and that was all.
And you witnessed this, was this a short time after the autopsy, or?
It was probably the following week.
I see. Did Dr. Humes or Dr. Fink or Dr. Boswell ever discuss the autopsy with you?
No. They were very closed-mouthed about it. I was under the impression that they had been told not to discuss it. And as I said, I waited the publication of the Warren report, and when I read that, I remember having a conversation with Jay Boswell and saying to him that on the basis of their description that was published in the Warren report, I agreed with their conclusions about trajectories and so on.
I see. Getting back to the log, do you recall entries, anything other entered other than the words CIC and the autopsy number, any other names that for that date or any other types of entries?
My recollection is the page was otherwise blank, but again, I'm recalling something from many years ago.
Perhaps you could help us out by explaining for us, since this, I think it's your area of specialty, what would the standard procedures have been for the supplemental examination of the brain following autopsy? How would the standard one have gone?
Well, certainly a routine brain injury case in which gunshots have been involved, we would today, and I suspect they did then, extensively document photographically the head and adjacent structures at every stage of the dissection.
Right.
And then, depending upon the severity of the disruption of the brain, when the cranium was finally opened, removing it in one piece or in several pieces, if removal in one piece was not possible. Again, with photographic documentation, gentle dissection at that juncture, and then we would fix the brain in formaldehyde typically.
And how long would the fixation take?
Actually, at Bethesda at that time, we were doing perfusion fixation. That is a variation on arterial embalming with formalin being injected via gravity into the major blood vessels. And the brain, while this was going on, the brain was immersed in formalin. And that speeded up the process of fixation rather significantly, so that we were able to go through the gross examination of fixed brains within less than a week after removal. Because of that procedure? Yes, perfusion fixation results is very rapid kind of fixation.
If one was not to do perfusion, or not to use perfusion, how long might one wait before it?
Immersion fixation typically takes 2 weeks, 10 days to 2 weeks.
10 days to 2 weeks. All right. Please proceed, and I guess one of our additional questions regard the weighing of the brain and the sectioning. Okay. Well, again, depending on the exact circumstances, the brain is weighed at the time of removal, and then again after fixation. At least that's our standard procedure. When you say after removal, you mean at autopsy? At the time of autopsy, yes. And there may be some variation in weight for a variety of reasons. One, at the time of removal, very commonly, some dura matter is left attached to the brain, which we always remove before weighing it after fixation. And obviously, in a case of trauma, there may be blood products also adding to weight at the time of autopsy that may not be available after fixation. I see. I would like to ask a follow-on question about perfusion fixation. You said it would allow examining a brain and cutting a brain in less than a week. Could you be any more precise than that on how many days one might have to wait? Again, depending on the adequacy of the blood supply, if there was not disruption of major vessels, actually you could examine a brain 2 to 3 days later. Okay. Can you think of any circumstances under which you would not section a brain at a brain exam? Or was this always done?
You mean at the time of autopsy?
No, at the time of the supplemental examination after fixation.
Why I would not section the brain?
Right.
Not under these circumstances, no. It really is the only way that you can really see the inside of the brain and follow things like complex trajectories and so on, and see the extent of traumatic, both primary and secondary damage.
I see. Following sectioning of a brain that had been subjected to gunshot wound, can you describe the type of photography that would be engaged in? In other words, would you photograph each section, and if so, how would it be done?
Well, I suspect in a case of that level of notoriety, I would have photographed everything twice. But normally, I would select sections that display best the abnormalities resulting from the gunshot wound for photography.
Dr. Davis, we interviewed Dr. Boswell under oath last February, 1996.
I don't doubt that.
Right, and he had a fairly strong recollection that you had been present at the supplemental examination of President Kennedy's brain, and so we're obligated at this point to ask you if he was mistaken.
I never saw President Kennedy's brain, personally.
Okay. How well were you acquainted with Dr. Pierre Fink?
Dr. Pierre Fink?
Right.
We were both professional colleagues and somewhat were socially friendly, not close. But I was at parties at Pierre's house.
Okay.
We knew each other, quite well.
Okay. And did he ever discuss the autopsy with you, since you both worked at AFIP?
No. Again, Dr. Fink is a very formal person to begin with, and I would not have thought of asking him, and he certainly never volunteered anything about that autopsy.
Okay. We have a witness who has recalled that Dr. Fink, on one occasion, complained with some bitterness at the lunch table at AFIP that his notes had disappeared the night of the autopsy, after the autopsy had concluded. And so this is another similar follow-on question for you. Did you ever hear any such complaint from Dr. Fink?
No. Okay. No, not to my recollection.
Okay. Have you ever been interviewed before, either by a Kennedy assassination researcher or by anyone in the government on this subject?
No.
Okay. Is there anything we have not asked you that related to the assassination that you would like to tell us? Any recollections you have, or anything you think we should know to try to complete the historical record?
I certainly had lots of personal feelings about it, but I don't think anything that would add significantly to the record. Well, I thank you very much for your time, and we appreciate your cooperation. I'm glad to do so. Thank you, sir. Right. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Good job.